Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. This is Scott Manning, YouTube Sports Talk. It is now time for my YouTube Friday Night College Football pregame show. I have a lot to talk about. I got to talk about Ohio State. I got to talk about Michigan. We have two top 25 matchups we got to talk about this week. I'm also going to focus on the Big Ten West because the Big Ten West may be decided before we know it. I mean, we may have a new Big Ten West champion. And only time will tell that. I also want to talk about the Power 5 conferences and what I think is going to happen there. And we also got some major matchups for down the road. I'm going to address all that tonight on my college football show. And then when I'll be back for my closing thoughts. So for right now, kick back, relax, enjoy the show. We are going to have a load of fun tonight. We started out with Ohio State. Urban Meyer is back. That is the best news of all for the Buckeyes. Ryan Day, I will give him his dues. He did a fantastic job filling in for Urban Meyer. And let me tell you something. He's going to get a $487,000 bonus for filling in for Meyer and going undefeated, going 3-0. Think about what he did. He had to face number 15 TCU. Ohio State took care of TCU 40-28. Now this week, Ohio State faces Tulane. But there's some bad news. Nick Bosa is likely going to be out for the season after having a surgery to correct an abdominal strain. I know it sounds crazy, but Nick Bosa's absence, it's going to hurt. Yes, I'm not going to lie to you. Nick Bosa's absence is going to hurt. However, the Ohio State defense has got such a depth chart. I got to be honest with you. I think Nick Bosa not being out there may not be so bad. Here's what. Draymond Jones, last Saturday night against TCU, he had an interception return. He had a pick six, brought it back for a touchdown, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, and he quarterback pressured poor Sean Robinson more times than I quit taking count. But think about the Ohio State defense. Listen to these defensive guys, and you'll see where I'm coming from. Draymond Jones, the defensive hero. One of the defensive heroes against TCU last Saturday night. Defensive back Chase Young, Jonathan Cooper. Those two guys are big. They can be the big defensive makers in Bosa's absence. Defensive tackle Robert Landers. He's another one you got to look out for. And nose tackle Davon Hamilton. He's a big dude. He can stop the run game, the pass game up front. That could be big. That could be big. Because let's think about this. After Tulane, we got to go to Penn State. We got the rematch in Happy Valley. And I'm going to tell you now, Nick Bosa's absence, it's going to hurt. Yes, I'm not going to lie to you. The captain of the defensive end of the ball, that's going to hurt. Yes, I'm not going to lie to you. But we have such a depth chart on defense that I think Ohio State will be all right. We'll be in good shape. Now, we face Tulane Saturday at 3:30. I don't have any of Tulane's information. I didn't think about writing it down because everybody thinks it's going to be a fairly easy victory for the Buckeyes. But I'm going to tell you now, if I was Urban Meyer, if I was Urban Meyer or Ryan Day, I would be telling them Ohio State, think about Tulane. We'll worry about Penn State next week. Because remember, we got Tulane first, then we got the showdown at Happy Valley. And I'm going to talk about that a little later on in the show. Stay tuned for that. And I'm going to be honest with you. Ohio State is going to have a dogfight in the Big Ten ahead of them. And that's all there is to it. And I'll address the Ohio State-Penn State game later in the show. All right. We have to talk about it. Michigan, Nebraska. I got to talk about that team up north. I know it hurts Ohio State fans, but I got to talk about it. Both teams are trying to avoid going 0-1 in Big Ten play. Now, Michigan lost their opener to Notre Dame, but they've got 2 wins against Western Michigan and SMU. This is their Big Ten opener. Nebraska is trying to avoid going 0-3 in the first time in forever. Nebraska is 0-2 for the first time since 1957 under new coach Scott Frost. And remember, Scott Frost came from Central Florida. He's trying to bring in some of his values, but right now it's not working. Now, Nebraska lost to Colorado 33-28 in the opening game of their season, and then they got embarrassed by Troy 24-19. And they got embarrassed by Troy 24-19. Keep that in mind. Shea Patterson is playing by Ohio with Donald Peoples-Jones. Those two guys there could be the guys to watch down the road. And I'm going to tell you something. They play good. Michigan's going to give us a battle. As far as Nebraska goes, Andrew Martinez is their star quarterback, but he's been banged up. And Andrew Bunch has been sitting in his backup. He's trying his heart out. Right now, Nebraska's trying to keep from going 0-3. They just want to get a win. Now, Nebraska, they don't want to go 0-1 in Big Ten play. They just want to win a game. But Michigan, this is their Big Ten opener. Keep that in mind. And I'm telling you, when Michigan gets into some of these battles against Wisconsin, Penn State, think about that. Because Harbaugh knows his job is on the line this year. And that's all there is to it. Now let's move on. Number 1, Alabama faces number 22, Texas A&M. Let's think about this for a second. Texas A&M has been a headache to Alabama in the past. Remember about 5-6 years ago when Johnny Manziel shocked Alabama when Texas A&M pulled off the upset in Tuscaloosa? It could happen again. Let's think about this for a second. Tua Tagovailoa has been doing fantastic at quarterback at Alabama, but Jalen Hurts has been getting some playing time too. Jerry Jeudy is one of the best running backs at Alabama right now. Last year at Kyle Field, Alabama had to come from behind to beat Texas A&M 27-19. That's what I'm thinking about. And Texas A&M coach Jimbo Fisher says, "I got my guys ready. I got my Aggies ready. We're ready to go face Alabama." Well, Coach Saban, I got to be honest. Well, Coach Fisher, I hate to break it to you. Nick Saban is 12-0 against former assistants, and that does include Kirby Smart from last year. There's something to think about there. But also, too, Texas A&M could have some weapons, too. Trevion Williams leads the SEC in rushing with 133 yards per game. Quarterback Kellen Mond has thrown for 274 yards per game, and he has 6 touchdown passes this season. So there's a lot to digest there. As number 1 Alabama faces number 22 Texas A&M on Saturday. Something has to give, and give big time. Either Nick Saban's going to suffer his first loss against one of his former assistants, or Tua Tagovailoa is going to have a field day. But let's think about this. Trevion Williams, he's one of the best running backs in the SEC, and that's something to think about. And Kellen Mond, he can be dangerous throwing the ball. So if I was Alabama, do not take Texas A&M's offense lightly. That's what got them last year. But this time around, this is going to be big. This game has a lot of meaning. The SEC West could be decided right here. If Alabama loses, that opens the door for LSU. And I'll get to LSU here in a few minutes. Alabama, if they can come out on top against Texas A&M, and as long as they stay undefeated going into that showdown in Death Valley on November 3rd, that could be huge. And I'll get to that here in a little bit. But Texas A&M, if they beat Alabama, we have a wide open race in the SEC West. And it's going to get crazy. Just get more crazy down the road. And that's all there is to it. All right. What I want to do right now is I want to focus on which everybody says this could be the game of the weekend. Number 7 Stanford versus number 20 Oregon. Oregon's still trying to find their identity. But let me tell you something. Coach Mario Cristobal has really turned the Oregon program around. They all kind of know. Well, let's think about this for a minute. Justin Herbert. He's one of the best quarterbacks out of the Pac-12. Could he be hiding something? Linebacker Jalen Jelks, one of the best defensive players out of the Pac-12. Offensive lineman Justin Hollins. He stepped up to the plate. Nose tackle Jordan Scott. Those 3 defensive players could be the ones that could stop Bryce Love in his tracks. Think about what San Diego State did in the opening game of the season. They held Bryce Love to only 29 yards for the game. That's what Oregon needs to do if they want to upset Stanford. They got to stop Bryce Love. And KJ, they got to stop Bryce Love, and that's the biggie. That's the most important thing this weekend. Keep that in mind. But running back Bryce Love and center back Elijah Holder, he's been very impressive this season. One of the best center backs in the Pac-12. And he can be a guy that steps up. This, ladies and gentlemen, this could be the game that decides the Pac-12. This has got Pac-12 heavyweight championship fight written all over it. And that's all there is to it. Let's think about it. Stanford, one of the best run offenses in the country, one of the best run offenses, there's one of the toughest defenses out of the Pac-12. Let me tell you something. Oregon could stop the run. They could stop the pass too. But as far as Stanford goes, if Bryce Love has a field day, Stanford's going to win the ball game. But if Oregon's defense can stop Bryce Love, we're going to have a slugfest on our hands. And this game right now, in my opinion, has Pac-12 heavyweight championship fight written all over it. This could decide the Pac-12. I know it's only the 4th week of the season, but let's think about it. USC, they're struggling. They're struggling right now after getting humiliated by Texas. Washington has one loss to Auburn already. Stanford and Oregon are the only two. There's only going to be one team left that's going to be undefeated in the Pac-12. And this game has got championship fight written all over it. And that's all there is to it. And the bottom line is, something's got to give. And we'll have to see what it is. And right now, it could be just about anything. All right. Now, I know it's kind of odd that I'm doing this. I want to talk about the Big Ten West. We have three. I'm going to move on, just talk about the Big Ten as a whole. I'm done talking about the games except for one, but I'm going to address Wisconsin and Iowa in just a second. I want to address the Big Ten Conference as a whole and where we stand right now. The top 4 teams in the Big Ten East. Let's think about this. Ohio State, Penn State. Next Saturday, the battle out in Happy Valley. That is going to be huge. Let's think about this. With no Nick Bosa around for Ohio State, Draymond Jones is going to be big. I've already talked about the OSU defense. The OSU defense is going to have to find a way to stop Miles Sanders, Trace McSorley. If they can do that, Ohio State's got this game won. But Dwayne Haskins, and this is the big one, Haskins has got to find a way to throw past a very tough Penn State defense. But remember, too, Penn State lost 8 defensive starters when the season started. They almost got humiliated by Appalachian State in the opening game of the season. There's a lot to think about there, too. But if you think it's going to be a Penn State-Ohio State runaway in the Big Ten East, you better be thinking about Michigan and Michigan State. Yes, Michigan State's lucky to be in the top 25 after getting humiliated by Arizona State a couple weeks ago. And we all know Michigan's lost to Notre Dame. But let's think about this for a second. Michigan State plays Indiana. They're 3-0. I'll get to Indiana in a second. And Michigan plays Nebraska. They're having their struggle this season. Ohio State gets to face Tulane, while Penn State gets to face Illinois out in Champaign. Out of Champaign. That's a 9 o'clock start on Saturday night. But right now, there's some other games. I want to talk about the Big Ten West, because we have 3 teams in the Big Ten West that are surprisingly 3-0. And there's something to think about there. And Wisconsin is not one of them. Wisconsin's 2-1. And I'll get to that in a second. Iowa, they are 3-0 in the Big Ten West. Indiana, 3-0 in the Big Ten West. They're not supposed to be a football school. Apparently the Hoosiers didn't get that memo. And the Minnesota Golden Gophers, 3-0 in Big Ten, and 3-0 so far this season, and they're in the Big Ten season. Wisconsin is 2-1. But I'm going to be honest with you. This is a possibility. I'm not saying anything yet. But there's a possibility that Wisconsin could possibly be 2-2 by the end of Saturday. This is what I'm talking about. Iowa has one, and I'm going to tell you right now, Iowa has one of the best rush defenses in the country. I'll get back to them in a second. Jonathan Taylor, last Saturday against BYU, he got held to 117 yards rushing and no big plays. Squally Canada, if you remember last Saturday, Squally Canada had more rushing yards than Jonathan Taylor. That is big. Alex Hornibrook, think about this for a second. Only 180 passing yards. He didn't have a touchdown pass, but he had an interception. He was only average last Saturday against BYU. And I'm going to tell you right now, if Alex Hornibrook is average for the rest of the season,
They might win the Big Ten West, and that's it. But right now, they may not win the Big Ten West the way they were playing.
Well, let's think about this for a second. As far as Iowa goes, the Iowa rush defense is one of the best in the Big Ten and one of the best in the country. They've only allowed 42 yards per game as far as the run game goes. And Nate Stanley is a quarterback that has been overlooked here in the Big Ten this season. Everybody's been talking about Ohio State, Wisconsin. And a lot of people picked Wisconsin to win the Big Ten championship and win the Big Ten West. We need to think about Iowa because Nate Stanley is one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten West. Noah Fant. He's one of the best. He's one of Nate Stanley's best targets. And I'm going to tell you right now, Iowa head coach Kirk Hearn says he's going to have his rush defense ready. He realizes they got to stop Jonathan Taylor, and they got to stop Alex Hornibrook. If the Iowa defense stops does what BYU did last Saturday and stop the run defense, Iowa's going to win the ball game. Because right now, and also too, if the Iowa defense can get to Alex Hornibrook, Iowa's going to win the ball game. Wisconsin, I think they're still smarting from that embarrassment to BYU. And keep this in mind. The game is in Iowa City at Kinnick Stadium. Now, Kinnick Stadium in Iowa City is not a fun place to play if you're an opposing team because if you think about it, you're crammed in. I've seen their stadium on TV, and I've seen it. The stadium is crammed in. I mean, you have the front row of the fans literally on top of the sidelines. And Iowa could possibly pull off another big victory. I think everybody's been overlooking Iowa. They're 3-0 right now. But they still have Big Ten play against Wisconsin. We'll have to wait and see what happens on this Saturday. But I'm telling you now, the Big Ten West might be decided tomorrow. And I know technically the Heartland Trophy is up for grabs. But in my opinion, I would say forget the Heartland Trophy. The Big Ten West could be decided on Saturday with Iowa and Wisconsin. Because if Iowa beats Wisconsin, that's going to really shake up the Big Ten race. This is going to shake up the Big Ten in a big way and big time. Everybody had Wisconsin winning the Big Ten. And they also had Wisconsin beating Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. Well, that's been scratched for now. And if Iowa pulls off the upset against Wisconsin, look out. Because we have a whole new ball game in the Big Ten. And that is all there is to it. Now, I want to talk about the Big 12. When we talked about the Big 10, let's talk about the Big 12 as a whole. I got 5 teams on the watch list that could still possibly take the Big 12 championship. Oklahoma State, West Virginia, and TCU. And yes, believe it or not, I'd have to say Texas. Now, as far as Oklahoma goes, Kyler Murray and Marquise Brown, they're the two best quarterback receiver combos in the country. I mean, Marquise Brown's one of the best players outside of Kyler Murray right now at Oklahoma. Are the Sooners missing Baker Mayfield? I don't think so. Let's think about this for a second. Look what Oklahoma's done so far. They're 3-0. But if you think Oklahoma's got it wrapped up, you better think about Oklahoma State. Tyler Cornelius. Think about what he did against Boise State last Saturday. Justice Hill. Look what he did. Tylan Wallace. Look what he did against one of the best teams out at West in Boise State. They're 3-0 right now. West Virginia. Think about this. Will Greer, a Heisman Trophy candidate. They picked up 2 spots in the AP Top 25 poll, despite the fact their game was canceled against NC State because of Hurricane Florence. And David Sills the 5th. He's one of the best. Because this season, Will Greer and David Sills have been so fun to watch out of West Virginia. And I'm going to talk about the Mountaineers a little bit more here in a little bit. So stay tuned for that. As far as TCU goes, and despite the loss to Ohio State last Saturday night, think about this. I still have TCU as a possibility of taking the Big 12 away. Sean Robinson, Darius Anderson, and Jalen Rieger are the best players that TCU has. And I'm going to tell you something. Last Saturday against Ohio State, I gave a game ball to Sean Robinson because of what he did. Think about what he did against Ohio State. Over 300 yards passing, I gave him a game ball in a losing effort because he earned it. And I'm going to tell you right now, TCU is on my watch list for possibly taking the Big 12 away. Anything can happen with just a few weeks left. We're already into the 4th week of the season. And if you think about this, think about how good TCU is. Now, despite the loss to Ohio State, TCU could be a team that could come out and take the Big 12 away. So let's think about that for a little bit. Now, keep in mind, TCU opens the Big 12 season against the Texas Longhorns. That's next Saturday. That is tomorrow. And let's think about this. Sam Ehlinger, Trey Watson, and little Jordan Humphrey are the best players for the Texas Longhorns right now. Here's the thing. They destroyed USC 36-17 last Saturday night. And they didn't make the top 25? Are you kidding me? Anyway, Texas is on my watch list cautiously for now. But my thing is, the Longhorns got to be careful not to lose any more ball games like this. But if you were to ask me right now, who would win the Big 12? I've got to be honest with you, and I'm not going to lie to you. I've got to go with West Virginia taking the Big 12 championship because they got Will Greer, David Sills V, and they're going to be fun to watch. And I'm going to be talking about West Virginia here a little bit more here in a little bit. I promise you that. But you better be thinking about Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State could be a team that could take the Big 12 away. I've seen stranger things come out of Mike Gundy. Besides I'm a man, I'm 40 speech. Besides Mike Gundy saying, come after me, I'm a man, I'm 40. I've seen stranger things come out of Oklahoma State and come out of Mike Gundy than I've ever seen before. But Lincoln Riley's got the Oklahoma Sooners, and you better be thinking about Oklahoma State. But West Virginia, in my opinion, is going to win the Big 12 crown. I mean, that's all there is to it. That's the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen. West Virginia is going to win the Big 12. And I'll come back to West Virginia. I'm not done talking about the Big 12 yet. I'll come back to it here in a little bit. All right. The SEC. This is a big one. The SEC East, if Georgia keeps their noses clean, they've got the SEC East won. Now, they do face Missouri tomorrow. But let's think about Georgia for a minute. Jake Fromm, Elisha Holyfield, Nicole Hardman. These guys, those three are the 3 stars and the team leaders of the Georgia offense so far. Their defense is super quick. Their defense is fast. And you got some big guys. And Kirby Smart's playing his cards right. Despite the fact that they no longer have Nick Chubb or Sony Michel, their presence is not being missed yet. Well, let's think about this for a minute. Jake Fromm, one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC outside of Alabama. He's one of the best. Elijah Holyfield, one of the best runners in the game. And Nicole Hardman, one of the best wide receivers in the game. Georgia may win the SEC East, but Missouri and Kentucky will have something to say about that. Now, Missouri does have Drew Lock, Larry Roundtree III, and Manuel Hall. And let's think about this for a minute. Georgia's only a 14-point favorite against the Missouri Tigers tomorrow. That's a 12 noon game. I'm going to be watching that game with special interest. Anything can happen on any given Saturday, and it usually does. Now, let's think about the SEC West. We have a bunch of teams that can take the SEC West. Alabama, I've already talked about them. Jerry Jeudy, Tua Tagovailoa, and Najee Harris. One of the best wide receivers for Alabama. LSU, they got Joe Burrow, Nick Brossette, Justin Jefferson. And if somebody would have told me that LSU would be staring at the top 5, would be staring at the top 5 when the season started, I would have said no way. But we need to think about this too. Mississippi State. You better be thinking about them too. Dalton Thompson, Kellen Hill, and Stephen Goodry. Let me be honest with you. If I had to pick a winner of the SEC West right now, I would have to go with Alabama. However, keep in mind, mark this date down, November 3rd, the showdown in Death Valley. The SEC West could be decided. The SEC West could be decided on November 3rd out in Death Valley, because let's think about it. LSU versus Alabama, that would be a big game to watch. And I'm not done talking about the SEC just yet. There's some big games we need to keep in mind. I'll come back to the SEC here in a few minutes, but I just want to give you some teams to watch at the moment. I'll come back to that. But first, let's talk about the ACC. And as far as my pick to win the SEC goes, Georgia's going to win the SEC East. There's no doubt in my mind. The SEC West, I'm going to cautiously stick with Alabama. But you better be thinking about LSU, because they got Joe Burrow, the former Ohio State quarterback, and they got some transfer guys to play defense. So they can do a lot of damage there too. And Georgia does face LSU down the road. I'll get to that here in a little bit. So let's think about that. Now, the ACC. This one, I think, is wide open. I really do. Now, Clemson is ranked number 3 in the country. I'm not going to take that away from you. Clemson has Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, and T. Higgins. They're one of the best offenses, but Clemson has one of the best defenses in the ACC. I want you to think about that for a minute. But Miami, despite the fact they got humiliated in the opening weekend of the season, Malik Rozier has been playing much better. DJ Dallas has stepped up, along with Jeff Thomas. Those 3 offensive guys have really stepped up. And the turnover chain gang is playing much better. And you know what I mean. I mean the Miami Hurricanes. They've got the 7-pound gold turnover chain gang, because they have this big old 7-pound turnover chain that the players get to wear when they cause a turnover. Now, I think that's pretty cool. That's where the chain gang comes in. Mm-hmm. Now, Virginia Tech, I still have them having a shot at winning the ACC. Despite the fact their game got canceled due to Hurricane Florence. Josh Jackson, Deshaun McKees, and Damian Hazleton are still the offensive leaders for Virginia Tech. And would you believe I have Boston College down as a shocker, as an outside chance of winning the ACC? Anthony Brown, A.J. Dillon, and Jeff Smith. Boston College got into the top 25 last weekend at number 23. Very impressive. If somebody would have told me the BC Eagles would be undefeated, I wouldn't have believed it. Syracuse, they have not cracked the top 25 yet, but they are 3-0. And look what they did against Florida State last Saturday. They shut out the Seminoles 37-0. Everybody was thinking, Florida State's going to get back into this. Get back into this game, get back into the conference. Nope. Eric Dungey is the best quarterback, and he knows how to run the ball. That's big. And Jamal Custis is one of the best receivers that Syracuse has right now. Now, I got 5 teams on my watch list out of the ACC. I'm going to still cautiously take Clemson to win the ACC. But you better think about Virginia Tech, because they got Josh Jackson, Deshaun McKees, and Damian Hazleton. Now, Trevor, nothing against Clemson and their defense. They got one of the best defenses in the country. And nothing personal against the Miami turnover chain gang. But Virginia Tech has got the best defense. They got the best offense in the ACC. Bottom line. Say what you want, and I know I'm going to get backlash over it, but I'm going to pick Virginia Tech to win the ACC. And that's all there is to it. Now, the Pac-12, I've got it basically narrowed down to 3 teams. The Washington Huskies, 2-1. Stanford and Oregon are both 3-0. I've already talked about Stanford and Oregon. I'm going to talk about Stanford and Oregon a little bit more, then I'm going to talk about Washington. Now, Stanford has one of the best quarterbacks that they've had in years in KJ Costello. You know about Blake Love, but you know the best wide receiver is JJ Whiteside. He's one of the best receivers in the Pac-12 right now. Bryce Love is a Heisman Trophy candidate. Let's think about that. But they also got one of the best defenses in the Pac-12. That's going to be a battle. And also, too, I've already talked about Justin Herbert already. But C.J. Verdell is one of the best running backs in the country, and Johnny Johnson III is one of the best receivers that Oregon has right now. Oregon's defense is one of the best in the one of the best in the Pac-12. And I'm going to be honest with you. If you think about their depth chart, look and think about this for a minute. Oregon and Stanford have a big face-off tomorrow night. And that's a night game. That's an 8 o'clock game out on the West Coast. But think about this for a minute. The winner of the Stanford-Oregon game is really going to be in the driver's seat. But don't count the Washington Huskies out just yet. Think about this. Myles Gaskin, one of the best running backs in the country. He could possibly have another 2,000-yard season. Aaron Fuller, one of the best wide receivers for the Huskies. Jake Browning, him and KJ Costello are going to have a quarterback battle. So I got a strange feeling there's going to be a quarterback battle between him and KJ Costello. I really do. But let's think about this for a minute. Now, Washington does have one loss already to Auburn. Stanford has yet to lose. Stanford has an easy game this week. Now, Stanford plays Oregon. Then after that, think about this for a minute. You think it's going to be easy for Stanford? Not on your life. Now, Stanford plays Oregon this week. Next Saturday on the 29th, Stanford, Notre Dame, Saturday night on NBC. And that game is in South Bend. There's a lot to think about there. And I'm going to say this now. I can see this game being crazy. But the Pac-12 race, I've only got it down to 3 teams already. USC's struggling right now. And USC really needs to wake up. They've already got 2 losses. And they got to get a wake-up call somewhere. They're not even in the top 25. And if somebody would have told me that USC would be on the outside, would have been outside the top 25 at this point of the season, I wouldn't have believed it. JT Daniels, he's been struggling. USC coach Clay Helton is like, we got to try to figure out what's going on. Well, let's see. A bad loss against Stanford. You got humiliated by the Texas Longhorns last Saturday night. There's a lot to digest there. And that's the bottom line, folks. That's pretty much all. And that's all there is to it. Now, I said I was going to talk about some very important games for down the road. Here they are. The first, and I'm going to start with the SEC, the Southeast Conference, because that's the way I did it. Now in the SEC conference, in the Southeast Conference, the important games I have, and I've got 4 very important games wrote down. November 3rd, Alabama LSU. I've addressed that already. Now, keep this in mind. If both Alabama and LSU are undefeated going into this battle on November 3rd, the showdown in Death Valley will decide. No matter what happens here, in my opinion, and the opinion of all the football gurus and some of my friends, and I've even had a conversation with my dad and my sister about this, and my sister's no college football, and she's no college football guru like me, okay? I'm just going to put that out now. She's an Ohio Bobcat, and I admit it. But anyway, that's for another time. But Alabama, LSU, I've had conversations with some of my friends, with some of the guys that I know. They've said no matter what happens here, Alabama, LSU, the showdown in Death Valley on November 3rd will decide the SEC West, no matter what happens. The bottom line is this. The game on November 3rd, no matter what, is going to decide the West. No matter what. Now, the second game I have on my watch list involves LSU. Georgia versus LSU on October 13th on a Saturday. That game's on October 15th. Georgia, Jake Fromm. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC East. Joe Burrow, and this is Jake Fromm versus the former Ohio State transfer Joe Burrow. What a matchup that's going to be. That's going to be a matchup right there. 2 of the best quarterbacks outside of the state of Alabama. Think about that. That is something that I would pay top dollar to watch. And let me tell you something, folks. This is going to be very fun. This Georgia LSU contest on October 13th, that would be worth the price of admission. Now, the third game I have marked down is Alabama versus Mississippi State. That is in somewhere in November. And I'm going to tell you right now, Auburn is still smarting after losing to LSU last Saturday. They've already got 2 losses already. They got 1 loss, and that's a bad one to LSU. So they're smarting a little bit. So Auburn right now, Jared Steinem, one of the best quarterbacks that Auburn's got. And they got they got a very good defense. They just blew a 21-10 lead in the third quarter against LSU last Saturday. In Mississippi State, they're playing much better now than I have seen in the past. Mississippi State, they're a team that everybody took lightly. And I'm going to say this now. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with this battle coming up somewhere in November. The number 4 game I have as far as the SEC important games, Texas A&M versus LSU on November 24th. Texas A&M, I've talked about them already, and they got a battle against Alabama. LSU, there's not much more you can say, except as far as the SEC goes, starting on October 15th, you know the old Michael Buffer phrase, let's get ready to rumble. You know how that phrase is? Well, the rumble's really going to begin in my opinion, on October 13th. When Georgia faces LSU, and that game is in Death Valley. I'm not sure. I think the game is in Death Valley. It could be out in Athens. I don't know. And when I find out for sure, I'll get back to you on that one. But now it's time to move on. Now let's move on to the Big Ten. This is the one that everybody in my part of the country wants to know about. I have 3 very important games on my watch list. Penn State, Ohio State, next Saturday. Not as in tomorrow Saturday, but the following Saturday on the 29th. Penn State, Ohio State. That game is in Happy Valley. Urban Meyer wants revenge for what James Franklin and Penn State did to him 2 years ago on a Saturday night in the whiteout. The whiteout might not be a factor. If it's a 3:30 kickoff, Ohio State would be in fairly good shape. But if it's a primetime game, look out. Because 2 years ago in primetime, Ohio State had Penn State on the ropes, and they were up 21-7, and then they gave it away. That's exactly what happened. And Urban Meyer even said it himself. We gave that game away. We threw it away. That's exactly what happened, and I admit it. And think about it. 2 years ago in 2016, Penn State was still trying to find footing after all those years of struggle under Joe Paterno. They went undefeated the rest of the way. Won the Big Ten championship. Ohio State did get into the college football playoff, yes. But Penn State took the Big Ten title. Eventually, they wound up losing to USC in the Rose Bowl in the greatest shootout in Rose Bowl history. That's something to think about. Penn State, Ohio State on the 29th. Well, let's think about this for a minute. No Nick Bosa. Will the defense be bothered by it? It might hurt a little bit. It's going to hurt a little bit. But Ohio State's has such a defensive depth chart, they could be okay. As long as they can contain Miles Sanders and Trace McSorley, Ohio State's got a shot. But Penn State, Penn State's still a big question mark to a lot of people. They had to start all over from scratch on defense. They lost 8 defensive starters from last year. They lost Mike Gesicki, Deshaun Hamilton to graduation. Coach James Franklin had to watch Saquon Barkley go number 2 in the draft last year. He lost 2 of his 2 assistant coaches when they went somewhere else. So James Franklin, I'll say it now, if he didn't have hair, he'd probably be about as great hair as my dad. I shouldn't sound like that, but that's just the way I am. It's just the way I feel. You know how it is. But I'm going to be honest with you. That game on September 29th is going to be a biggie. Now, I've already talked about Wisconsin and Iowa. Let me remind you, forget about the Heartland Trophy. Forget about that. My thing is, the Big Ten West could be won tomorrow. If Wisconsin loses tomorrow to Iowa, they're screwed. They'll be 2-2 overall. They'll be 0-1 in Big Ten play. Wisconsin's probably smarting from that after losing to BYU last Saturday. And anything can happen, and it usually does. Number 3 on my watch list involves both teams from that state up north, Michigan and Michigan State. And that game's on October 20th. Jim Harbaugh knows He's coaching for his job. And I said it when the season started. I had 5 games on the Michigan watch list. Notre Dame, they lost that one already. They have Wisconsin. They still have to face Penn State. 2 more biggies right there. Then they got Michigan State, Ohio State. I said lose 3 of those 5, Harbaugh's out the door. That is a biggie for Michigan. If Jim Harbaugh loses to Michigan State, that seat of his in Ann Arbor is gonna go up about another 150 to 200 degrees. And I think he knows it too. But as far as Michigan State goes, Mark D'Antoni, he may still be smarting from that loss that he suffered to Arizona State a couple weeks ago. And keep in mind, Michigan State faces Indiana tomorrow. That's something else to think about. Indiana's 3-0, a basketball school, and they're not known for college football. But anything can happen. Indiana's 3-0 in the Big Ten West. Michigan State is only 2-1. And they're lucky to be they're clinging out of the top 25 by the skin of their teeth. And I'm going to tell you this. That game on October 20th, it could matter to Jim Harbaugh if he keeps his job or not. And that's all there is to it. You lose to your rivals, that's a major no-no. And let me be honest with you. For Buckeye Nation and for Michigan Nation, and everybody knows this, Jim Harbaugh has got to beat Michigan State, at least. Beat Michigan State. If he loses to Michigan State or Ohio State, he's out the door. And that's all there is to it. All right. Let's talk about the Big 12. I got 4 games on my important game watch list, and I'm going to go through them. The first game on my watch list, Oklahoma versus West Virginia. That is a biggie. That game is on November 23rd. And that's a Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. That's huge. Here's why. Oklahoma, Will Grier, David Sills V, the best passer receiver combo in all the Big 12. And think about this. The Big 12 got some big help on defense too, with transfers from USC and LSU in this before the season started. Oklahoma, they're not missing Baker Mayfield yet. Lincoln Riley's already said we can possibly beat West Virginia, but that's a ways down the road. Kyler Murray and Marquise Brown. But this would be something if both teams go into this battle on November 23rd undefeated. That would be something. I would pay top dollar to see that. I would. Oklahoma, West Virginia on a Saturday night, on a Friday. That would be cool to see. Now, the second game on my watch list also involves West Virginia. Just give me a second here. West Virginia versus TCU. I forgot to write the date down for that game, but I apologize. Will Grier and David Sills versus Sean Robinson and TCU. That would be great to see. Think about it. TCU already has 1 loss to Ohio State. They don't have any conference losses yet. West Virginia, they're one of the best teams in the Big 12. They already started the season 2-0. The cancellation of Hurricane Florence didn't hurt them any. The Mountaineers could come out and take the Big 12 away. But TCU, think about them. TCU, despite that loss to Ohio State, they could take the Big 12 away. So nothing's decided yet, and nothing will not be decided for sure. But I'm going to tell you right now, this game here, West Virginia TCU, I would pay top dollar to see that. I really would. Because you got one of the best offense, you got one of the best quarterbacks going possibly, and a Heisman Trophy candidate, and Will Grier. That would be, and I think West Virginia will still win the Big 12. I really do. But they got to go through TCU, Oklahoma. That's a biggie. That's something to think about, too. Number 3, November 10th. Mark this down. Oklahoma State versus Oklahoma. Oklahoma State and Mike Gundy have done some crazy things in the past. Lincoln Riley says he's got his Oklahoma troops ready. The battle of the Bellwether State, the battle of the state of Oklahoma, and the state championship will be up for grabs. And that would be something cool. Kyler Murray, Marquise Brown, I've already talked about him. Oklahoma State, I've already talked about him. I don't need to build this game up any further. But I'll wait till I get a little closer down the road. Number 4 on my watch list. TCU, Oklahoma on October 20th. TCU, Oklahoma, I don't need to build them up anymore. I've already built them up already. I'll do that when I get closer. But these important games I'm just mentioning are just something to keep in mind and just to mark on your calendar. So this on your college football calendars. So this way, you know what's going on. Now, the ACC. This one here has got there's a lot of big title fights on here. The first game on my watch list, surprisingly, Clemson versus Boston College. BC got into the top 25 last Saturday. And they're facing one of the best defenses in the ACC in Clemson. That game is on November 10th. The number 2 game on my important game watch list out of the ACC is Notre Dame and Virginia Tech on October 6th. You know, when I said when the season started I had a bunch of games, I had Florida State, Notre Dame on my watch list, I have scratched that. I've had a change of heart. Notre Dame, Virginia Tech on October 6th, that's going to be a biggie. I haven't talked about Notre Dame much because they play Wake Forest. I didn't write that information down. I should have. Damage done, I apologize. Notre Dame. Brandon Wimbush, one of the best quarterbacks at Notre Dame versus Virginia Tech. Now, Notre Dame's got a really great defense. They got a great run game, too. Virginia Tech, I've already talked about them, so I don't need to talk about them any further. Now, the third game does involve Virginia Tech when they play Miami on November 17th. Virginia Tech, Miami. What will happen in that game? Will Virginia Tech run all up and down the field all over Miami? Or will Malik Rozier and company do the damage? And Miami's got the turnover chain gang. Keep that in mind. That's something to think about. And now, let's move on to the Pac-12. I've only got 2 games on my watch list. And those games are Oregon, Stanford on Saturday night. I've already talked about that. Stanford faces Washington later this season. KJ Costello and company versus KJ Costello, JJ Arcega-Whiteside, and Bryce Love versus Jake Browning, Myles Gaskin, and the rest of the Husky offense. And I'm going to tell you right now, that's going to be a battle down the road. You've already heard me talk about Oregon, Stanford. This could decide the Pac-12. Whoever wins this game is going to be the only team left undefeated in the Pac-12 overall. Stanford, Oregon. That's a biggie on Saturday night. I've already addressed that. And that's all there is to it. And now, there's a few other games on my watch list that I did not mention that I want to talk about. The first one, Notre Dame, Stanford, next Saturday night. That's a biggie. And that's a 7:30 game prime time on NBC. And everybody says that Notre Dame has nothing to prove. They can't prove anything. They can't do anything. Well, the Notre Dame defense has really stepped up the last few weeks. Okay, they've had some questionable victories against Ball State and Vanderbilt. Now, Notre Dame plays Wake Forest next Saturday. There's a lot to think about there. If Notre Dame really shows up on Saturday, they have a chance. But let's think about this. Notre Dame, Stanford. What Notre Dame needs to do when they play Stanford is they got to stop Bryce Love. They got to find ways to stop JJ Arcega-Whiteside, KJ Costello, and Bryce Love. The main thing is stop Bryce Love. That's the big thing. However, Notre Dame's got the defense to do it. They've also got Brandon Wimbush. They got some of the best running backs in the country. Dexter Williams, will he play? There's a big question mark there. But there's one more game that I want to talk about real quick. The Holy War, to close the season out. BYU versus Utah. The Holy War. I know it sounds wrong of me to say this, but I got to mention BYU real quick. Tanner Mangum. Now, BYU doesn't have much of a quarterback. Doesn't have a passing game, but they got one whale of a run game in Squally, Canada. He came up big last Saturday against Wisconsin. Now, BYU is an independent. They can't go for a conference title. They can't go for They can't go for a conference championship. But they can get some big signature wins. I'm going to say it's time to take BYU It's time to start taking BYU seriously. They've proven a lot to me when they knocked off Wisconsin. For them to go in to Camp Randall in Madison on the road and to play in a hostile environment like that, let me tell you, Camp Randall is not a fun place to play. That is a hostile environment. BYU went in there, went through Wisconsin's defense like they were nothing last Saturday. The reason why I talk about BYU in Utah, it is the holy war in college football. But let me tell you something. This has been a great. The first 3 weeks, and that's a game that's going to be worth watching. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for my closing thoughts on this night. The first 3 weeks of the college football season has been wonderful. It's been great. You guys have seen stranger things happen. In the opening week of the season, we watched LSU knock off Miami. We watched Florida State prove they're not worthy of being in the top 25. We watched Notre Dame go through Michigan's defense like nothing when Michigan's defense was all hyped up. Everybody hyped them up and said, oh, Michigan is going to be on the comeback trail. Nope. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. The opening few weeks of the season has been crazy. Last Saturday, we watched BYU upset Wisconsin. We watched an instant classic between TCU and Ohio State. And we've also seen a lot of stranger things happen in the first 3 weeks. We go into week 4 of the college football season. Hopefully things will be a little bit calmer than they were last Saturday. But I'm not holding my breath because I've been around the game too long. And I've been speaking my opinion to a lot of people like you guys for so many years. The bottom line is, if you think the first 3 weeks have been crazy, it's been fun. We've had a lot of fun in the first 3 weeks. Now this is week 4. It's crunch time. It's time to get serious. And it's time for some of these coaches and some of these players to put their foot down and say, we're going to take it all the way this year. And that's all there is to it. And the bottom line is, this season is going to be a very fun one to watch. And that's all there is to it. All right, folks. I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight. I will be back tomorrow night between 11:30 and midnight. I haven't decided on the time yet. I want to wait for Oregon and Stanford to conclude. Then as soon as the Oregon-Stanford game is over, I will get the notes wrote down for that game. As soon as I am set, I will be on the air for the Scott Manning YouTube College Football Postgame Show, for the Postgame Podcast Show. I'm going to have a lot to talk about tomorrow night, I'm sure. But I want to thank you guys tonight for being with me here tonight. This 45 minutes to an hour with you has been so fun. You guys are a great group, a great audience. Thank you so much for being with me here tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night after the Oregon-Stanford game. So keep that in mind. Unless any major upsets happen before then, I will pass that along to you. If we have any major upsets along the way, I'll give an instant opinion of what I saw. You guys have a great night. Thank you so much for being with me. You guys are a great group. This is Scott Manning saying good night, good luck, and thank you. And I thank you and good night. Good night, everybody, and God bless.